Shalom. This is Rabbi Stephen Leon, the founder and the rabbi of the Anusim Center here in El Paso and Synagogue. And this podcast is called The Secret Jews of the Southwest. And I thought today, actually the day we're doing this is right at the beginning of the new year, 2024. And I was going to involve and ask questions of a family that's been active in our community for many years. Steve Kaplowitz, his wife Karen, and their son Joel. So I would like to start off by asking each one of them, Steve, what do you do in our community?
So I've been lucky. I spent the last 28 years working in local media. I have hosted an afternoon drive sports radio show on KROD, AM radio. I also am in media sales. So anytime it involves not just radio commercials, but also digital ads and everything you could possibly imagine that could be sold on a digital platform, I do as well. So the radio show is actually the easy part of my day. The majority of my time is spent still in marketing, consulting, and ad sales.
Wow. Any particular product that has been extremely interesting for you?
I'm really, believe it or not, very fond of the digital marketplace. I find that digital media continues to expand and evolve. Just look at a podcast like this, and 10 years ago, you didn't see nearly as many of these as you do today. And I feel like, for the most part, anything you want to try to target a ideal consumer can now be done through the digital marketing world. And that's something that really continues to amaze me, is just how evolved and how elaborate just the digital marketing industry is. So I'm a big fan of that.
Really, yeah. The world is moving forward.
It is. And as long as smartphones continue to develop, I think there'll be a pretty good market for us.
I myself am amazed that I'm doing podcasts.
I'm not.
I'm from the dark ages.
I feel like, you know what? This is perfect for you, and I love the fact that you're doing this.
Oh, thanks. So, Karen, can you tell us a little bit about what you do in our community?
Hi, Rabbi.
Hi.
Hi. So for the last 10 years, I've been a part-time instructor at El Paso Community College. I teach nutrition, and I take care of Joel and all of the household necessities. So, yeah, that's what I do.
Great. And Joel, what do you do in our community?
So I go to school, and I also play baseball.
And how old are you?
I'm 11.
Wow. Well, are you enjoying your vacation right now?
Yes, very much so.
Doing anything exciting?
I did something last night that was exciting. I had
Can
a
you
sleepover.
tell us about it?
I had a sleepover with my friends.
That is exciting.
Yes.
I don't have sleepovers with my friends anymore. Haven't done that in a long time. So I'd like now to ask you a little bit. We can continue this order. Steve, do you have any connection with the subject of my podcast, which is The Secret Jews of the Southwest?
I think the connection with me has been the relationship I've had with you all of these years, dating back to the many years you spent as the chief rabbi at Congregation B'nai Zion. And when I found that this was something you had started to really, from its infancy, get involved in more and more and watch it grow and continue to bring so many people back to the Jewish faith that were gone or didn't even realize their connection, that interested me in a big way. I like to see how people just their personal relationship is with God. And when I've watched and gone to the Anusim Center for the different prayers and the different high holidays that you've had, and seeing just everybody's deep involvement and connection with you, that was something that really interested me in a big way and continues to do so because I've watched how this group and this congregation grows year after year as you've continued to build it.
Okay. And Karen, what is your connection with the Secret Jews of the Southwest?
Well, many years ago, I have a cousin, Ray, who lives in California. Hi, Ray. He is really into genealogy, and he had been trying to find the connection, our ancestors. And while we don't have really good, strong evidence, but we do have evidence that some of our relatives came over from Spain around the time of the Spanish Inquisition, and it is believed that my ancestors had Jewish roots. There was one cousin many years ago who was wearing the Star of David, and she said that she found the lineage on her mom's side of the family, suggesting that they were Jews from Spain. Unfortunately, before I could speak to her, she died. And I haven't been able to find any other evidence, but I do believe that my ancestors were Jewish from Spain and converted to Catholicism because I was raised in the Catholic faith and then converted 11 years ago. Yeah.
Wow. So your journey is related to this journey that's very common here in this border town of El Paso. You know, according to statistics, probably between 15 and 25% of the population, both of El Paso and of Juarez, have Jewish roots. And even though there's very few Jews in either community, there's approximately 5,000 Jewish people in El Paso, and really no one has any idea because unfortunately in Juarez there really is no established Jewish community. I used to go there until COVID hit, haven't gone back yet, so we do things now by Zoom, but I used to go every few weeks and meet with a group of people. We met in a coffee house, and they were about to do their return. There were about 50 people, along with, among them, a lot of kids. And to me, we're bringing back alive this heritage that had been lost for so many years. So now I'm going to ask you, tell us a little bit about your family, Steve.
Sure. So we came to El Paso from New York in 1978. My mom and dad were born in Brooklyn. And
as was I.
Well, I mean, we all have something in common then.
That's
there
right.
we go. And it's funny because my mom was born in Flatbush and grew up in Flatbush. My dad was Bensonhurst. Yet they both belonged to conservative shuls that were close by, walking distance to their homes. And when I was talking to my dad a lot about, growing up with his family, because his mom had 10 other brothers and sisters, the family all lived in the same area for the most part in Brooklyn, and they all belonged to the same shul. And in those days, even though it was a conservative shul, not every couple sat together like you would get now. And sometimes the men would sit on one end and the women would sit on the other, because I guess in the 50s, conservative Judaism might have been a little different than it is today. They also would have to buy tickets to go to the high holiday services. It wasn't something that you could just show up and have a seat waiting for you. They had tickets like that. But because of their conservative Judaism, when growing up, when we moved to El Paso in 1978, the first place we found was Congregation B'nai Zion, which in those days was located closer to downtown than it is today. And I started going to the El Paso Hebrew Day School when I was in kindergarten, and spent the first 7 years of my elementary school going to the day school while also attending services at Congregation B'nai Zion. I eventually led junior congregation, which was a highlight of my young life, going to synagogue. And again, up until about probably 5-6 years ago, when we moved over to Temple Mount Sinai, Congregation B'nai Zion had always been home. And for me, always having a strong Jewish background and upbringing was a very important thing to my family and obviously to me.
I'd like to ask you a little bit about your parents. Your father has passed, and he was really a good friend of mine. And tell us about the deli that he opened up here in El Paso. Because
Sure.
we didn't really have, we had Alex's when I first came, and after Alex passed, Joel Kaplowitz opened up a deli.
He did. It was an interesting venture from food service because prior to the deli, he had a yogurt stand that was lasting about probably 6-7 years. And then he decided that he wanted to bring a true kosher deli to El Paso. So you know very well because you were involved in this process, but Cappy's Deli had opened up in Colony Cove 2 at the time and was about as authentic a deli as you would find. Now, we had Breyer's Deli at the time, but my dad took it a step further because he flew all of his fish in from New York, flew his bagels in from New York, and brought in Hebrew National meat from the East Coast. And my mom was in the kitchen making the chopped liver with Emily Schwartz and a few other people that were there. And it was a very small but family-owned deli that lasted about a year. Sadly, right around the time I graduated college and started in radio, they had closed the deli. But it was, I know for them, I guess one of their highlights because they had the opportunity to at least give El Paso for a brief period of time a little bit of an idea of what true kosher food is all about and bringing some of the fish and the bagels in from New York.
Yeah, I think the fact that it didn't make it here wasn't because of the quality of the food. It was excellent. It was wonderful. But maybe that's part of that whole concept of the secret Jews of the Southwest. Some of them are so secret that they don't appreciate good deli.
I agree with that. I wish they would have been a little more appreciative some 30 years ago, but you're right about that.
Yeah.
It was a good time for sure.
Karen, tell us a little bit about your family.
Hi. So my dad is from Denmark, and he was in the Danish Air Force, and he was stationed at Fort Bliss in El Paso in the 60s. My mom is from El Paso, and they met on his second tour to El Paso, or second trip, and they dated for about a year. And when he went back to Denmark, she went with him, and then they got married. And my oldest brother, Eric, was born in Denmark. And my dad decided he wanted to come back to El Paso. He really liked it here. He liked the weather. He liked the spicy food. So we've been in El Paso ever since. And, we, like I mentioned before, I was raised Catholic, and we were a very strict Catholic family, always attending Mass on weekends, even on vacation. My mom would find a church wherever we were. And when I was in my 20s, and we met Cousin Ray, who was doing the genealogy, and we learned about the Jewish heritage, I started thinking about possibly, looking into the religion. I didn't have a strong connection with Catholicism. I had pretty much just left the faith. There wasn't any bad feeling. I didn't have a connection with it at all. But I didn't really pursue the Jewish faith until I met Steve. And then I started going to services with him a little bit here and there. And I really just fell in love with the religion. And at some point, I don't even know when it became apparent that I just needed to make you've mentioned transition, going back to the Jewish roots. I don't remember when that happened, but I did do the conversion exactly 3 weeks before Joel was born, because that was the most important thing, was that when he was born, I wanted him born to a Jewish mother.
Namely you.
Exactly. Yes.
So, Joel.
Yes.
I would like you to tell me, you're 11 years old.
Yes.
Right? Tell me, what do you like about the Jewish religion? What do you like to do and things like that?
So I like a lot that, like, my friends at school, a lot of my friends, they're not Jewish, so I can teach them stuff and they have no idea. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just really cool that I do a lot of different stuff than all my other friends.
Okay. But is there something specific about what you do Jewishly besides teaching your friends, which is a great thing to do?
Yes.
What about, are Jewish holidays or?
Yes, I love the Jewish holidays. I love the food that we eat, the kosher food.
Oh, you're really Jewish when you love the food. That's right.
Yes.
And what about any particular holiday that's your favorite Jewish holiday?
I would say Passover.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
Because I think this is Passover, where you hide the matzah.
Yeah, that's fun.
And then you have to get yeah, I like that part.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I appreciate your telling us a little bit about that. So, Steve, you and I actually have a connection even in the sports field, because both coming from New York, we have, I think, some kind of a loyalty to the New York teams. We wish they would do better.
We like to suffer, is what we like to do. We do.
That's right. So actually, you answered the question. I was going to say, what's the connection as a sports announcer and an expert in sports? What do you think the connection might be between your Jewish identity and sports?
That's a great question. I think that, as somebody who's Jewish, you take a lot of pride in your religion, and you try to be as observant as you can. And I'll say this, for me, when you're a sports fan, you definitely have a pride in your team. You do. No matter how good your team is doing, you stay with them. You hang in there. And, it's difficult, because I can even look at what's going on right now with Israel and the war that's happening with Hamas, and how tough that's been for a lot of us, not just in how the rest of the world is looking at the Jewish people, but seeing some of the stories of the people whose lives are getting lost, and even some of the hostages whose lives were lost. We found that out just a few weeks ago. It really kind of makes you reevaluate, Israel in your own sense of Judaism. But at the same time, you realize that ultimately you believe in Israel for a reason. This is our homeland. This is what we've always, learned is from just the days of the Bible to today. And, despite as difficult as it's been for Israel, they've been persecuted since the beginning of time. They've always fought for themselves. They've always fought for their freedom, and they continue to fight today. And you just hope that one day there will be peace. It's what we always talk about in shul, and we talk about it just, with us in conversation, that despite all of the conflict that's happening and all the lives that are lost, still have to hold out hope that one day there will be peace and everybody can live, in harmony.
I want to ask you a more specific question. I saw that either today or yesterday was Sandy Koufax's 88th birthday. Remember some of the things about Sandy Koufax, who was a Jewish baseball player for the Brooklyn Dodgers?
Yeah, he went to the same high school as my dad.
Really?
They both went to Lafayette High School.
Wow.
And Sandy would have been about 10 years older than my dad. So, but I just remember he was always proud of Sandy Koufax. That was what he always talked about when he would say he was at Lafayette High School. And Sandy was a legend. And I think he went to the University of Cincinnati before he started pitching for the Dodgers in the mid-50s. And the funny thing about Sandy Koufax is he didn't pitch on Yom Kippur. And that was, I think, the only baseball player at the time who ever said, I'm not playing during a World Series game because it's the high holidays. And that was a big statement. But in those days, Brooklyn had so many Jewish baseball fans, it wasn't like there was an outcry and fans were upset with Sandy. I think in those days, people understood, hey, he's Jewish, he's observant for the high holidays, he's not pitching, we're not going to be upset with Sandy, we understand it.
Yeah, to this day, everyone talks about that. It was really a question of pride. Here he was the best pitcher, basically. I think he had won the Cy Young 3 times in his relatively short career because he had arthritis in his pitching arm.
That's right.
I'm doing the sports now.
You're good. You should host a sports show.
I'm telling you, you should talk more about the high holidays.
I like that. I will.
But, as a kid, that was really something very, very special. The fact that he was the top player on the team, and he said, my faith, my identity is more important even than throwing a baseball. I think that's just an incredible lesson for someone whose whole life is devoted to sports.
No, I totally agree with you on that. And the funny thing is that when he was in Brooklyn, he really hadn't established himself as the true dominant pitcher that he became when he went to Los Angeles. He was a young, hard-throwing, wild pitcher who never really found his role with the Brooklyn Dodgers. It wasn't until they moved west to really where he established himself as that, Hall of Fame pitcher we know today. But there's been a few Jewish ball players. Hank Greenberg's another one. And, you've talked about some of the greats we've seen in baseball history and in sports history. And it's interesting to sometimes see the relationship that athletes have with Judaism, especially as it relates to professional sports.
One of the things I used to do with the kids, especially the year of their bar mitzvah, those that wished to, I would take them to wrestling matches. When I was in New Jersey, I would take them to Madison Square Garden in New York. And I even had a fan club. I'm going to give you a trivia question. Do you know who was considered the Jewish wrestling champion? I'll give you a hint. He was from New Zealand.
No, this would be before my time, so why don't you go ahead and
what an
humor me on
excuse. How do you know it's before your time? His name was Abe Jacobs.
I've heard of him, Rabbi.
Abe Jacobs' favorite hold was the Kiwi hold. That was a submission hold. And Abe Jacobs, I had a fan club for Abe Jacobs as a teenager, and he was wrestling in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where I lived. I invited him to my house. He's about 6'8". He comes to the house, but he wasn't exactly, all of his oars were not exactly in the water. So what he did, instead of ringing the bell, he looks in the window, and my mother is cooking dinner, and she starts screaming. Then he gently knocked on the door. He came in, and he talked with my dad, who was a cantor. They talked about religious life in New Zealand for about an hour. He was really an amazing guy, Abe Jacobs.
What's amazing to me is that he actually took you up on the offer to come over and have dinner at your house. Because nowadays, a professional wrestling star, even if, let's say, Joel's the head fan club member of a professional wrestler, if he invites him to the house, there is no chance that wrestler will be showing up unannounced at the house. So that right there had to be a thrill for you.
Yeah, that was a great memory. So, Karen, now I'm going to ask you, you already talked a little bit about it, but what do you think, is there something inside of you, do you think, and this history of you that has brought you to Judaism, besides Steve?
I did not convert for Steve. I do want to make that very clear.
She's more religious than I am.
Well, and I wanted our household to be very cohesive, and so that was one reason why I did it. That's a good question. I don't think I've ever had that question asked to me before. There is a sense of comfort and a feeling of being at home when I'm in and listening to the prayers and the services, like a Shabbat service, a feeling that I never had before when I was going to Catholic Mass. The Catholic Mass always felt awkward to me, and this feels comfortable, at home. I'm at peace. So I do think there's something inside of me. Maybe it was my ancestors, the bloodline. I don't know what it is. But it's a really nice feeling to feel so comfortable and so at home. And I do think religion is really important. It's important for me. It's important for our family. And so it's nice to have that. And the community that we see, especially now with the Anusim, I think it's a really great place to be. The community is amazing. And you've done a really good job with bringing all these people together.
Yeah, I have often said that when I do this outreach for people that have this ancestry, obviously I'm not there. My goal is not to convert people. Judaism is not a missionizing religion. It was at one time when there was just idolatry. We were bringing people from idolatry to a belief in a moral God. That was different. But we never try to convince Muslims or Christians to come to Judaism. But the crypto-Jews, the Anusim, they have a different background because that was stolen from them. And I think it's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about it. And one of the things I've often said, and I think it's in your case, Karen, there is something I believe in the hearts of people. There are many people, they have researched their genealogy. They have found out, they have definite evidence that their ancestors were the victims of the Inquisition and the expulsion. And yet they're not motivated to come back to Judaism. It's not something, they're very content. And I'm happy with that too. I think that that's important because I think the more that we know about each other and each other's faiths, there's so much misinformation going on today. You brought up the Israel situation. There's so many people that are protesting and saying things about Israel that's just not true. I mean, nobody's happy with the fact that there are innocent children and innocent people in Gaza that are dying. No one's happy about it. We're crying about it. But on the other hand, where is the crying on the other part? The killing of kids, raping of women. Who does that? And then says, as they're doing it, that God is great. It's not that God that's in your heart. As we're sort of winding up this podcast, for each of you, including you, Joel, so I'll give you an extra minute to think. What would be your message? And kind of keep it a little bit brief. What is your message, you think, for the 2024?
Just in general, the message.
General or Jewish, if you had the opportunity to address a lot of people, what would you say to them?
Well, I think you said it best, and that is, when you hear a lot in the media today, and that's something that sometimes can be good, but it can also be bad. And it's almost as if before you react, just to react, take a step back, look at the whole situation, give it some thought, and then really come up with a good maybe sense of action. It's interesting because we're going into a political year this year.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not exactly, 2024 scares me a little bit, Rabbi. I'm not going to lie to you, not just with Israel, but just our country in general. So I guess my message is, I hope we come out of this year okay. I'm praying for a lot of us this year because I know what's going to be coming up. And I just hope that when it's all said and done, we have a year that will be filled with peace, happiness, health, and hopefully just a good year. That's really all I can say right now.
Okay. Karen?
Well, I'm going to echo a lot of what Steve said, and I do agree with everything you're saying. My hope is that people become a little bit more educated before they just take action or, maybe the popular opinion is to support Palestine for whatever reason, which is fine if that's how people want to believe. But I would love to see people have a little bit more education before they just jump on a bandwagon. And it scares me a little bit, especially with younger people, because I work at a college. So that I work with, emerging adults, as they're called. And I've talked to other colleagues and I haven't seen any of my students, but they've seen students with swastika signs on their phones or on their, personal belongings. And I don't know if people fully understand what that really means. And so I'd love to see people get educated and peace and happiness.
Joel,
okay,
you've
so
got
I say
1 minute to give a message.
Does it have to, can I be short or do I?
Yes, please be sure.
Okay,
even though you're relatively tall.
Yes, so my message would be for 2024, if a time gets tough, just push through it. Don't give up.
Thank you.
Be good.
Thank you. Well, I'll tell you, that's you're right there, right to the point. And I would like to say that what I would like to see, I obviously as a rabbi, praying is also very important, but I don't think it's enough. I think what we really need to be aware of is how we could change this world. And this world right now, it's no secret that the motto, let's say, of the Jewish people from our beginning is Tikkun Olam, make this a better world. And 2024, I'm not as afraid as I thought I might be because I have faith in people. I have faith in your family. I have faith in people that think before they act. I think that if we could just, instead of protesting and talking down about people, if we could just do the opposite, talk about the good things. There are good qualities in each of our faiths. There are good qualities in each of our lands. Let's not make our goal, as some people do, as this terrorist group does, to destroy other people and to destroy another nation. That has never been the agenda of the Jewish people. The agenda of our people is to bring peace and justice and repair this world so that people like your son, Joel, will have a future filled with peace and goodness and happiness. Amen.
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 Right.